Welcome back to this unfortunate episode of the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse. Before I get into this episode, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff. Get in on our $200,000 mega contest and pick five games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online, the game starts here. All right. So we have come to the end of the season for the Orioles. It was a really, I'm here to recap the game two loss against the Kansas City Royals. The Orioles lost 2-1. So we have now been eliminated from the playoffs. It was a really unfortunate display of how this team lost. We got swept again in this series. Losing two straight games. And it's just really thinking about it, it's just really, really unfortunate. There was a lot of optimism, I think, coming into the playoffs because this team in the past week started to show signs of life with the offense, especially since the return of some of the players that were coming off the injured list. But what transpired didn't end up being what the Orioles were hoping for at all. So there was a lot of, and the fans, of course. So yeah, there was just so much optimism. I think some of it was a little misguided. I will say. I came into this series with sort of reasonable expectations. I did not think that given the past 3 months of baseball that this team has had displayed, I did not come into the playoffs for the Orioles thinking that we had a legitimate run at the World Series this year. I definitely thought that potentially before the year, even though I had my reservations about that actually happening and that being possible. But especially over the past 3 months and entering the playoffs, even with the last week or so of more, positive play or positive offense against the Twins and the Yankees, I had sort of tempered expectations about what this team could do realistically. Now, I did think that I would have said we're favorites to get past this first round. And I sort of thought that because we were playing a Kansas City Royals team that wasn't playing very well either. But I definitely did not think that this team was going to win the ALCS, for instance. I didn't really see that as a likely possibility. So I sort of had tempered expectations coming into the series a little bit. I think that this outcome of the Orioles losing both games to Kansas City was definitely possible. Of course, it was possible. It happened. But I would have thought that it was but prior to the series, I would have thought that this was a possible outcome. Um, but it would have been nice if the Orioles had even put up a little bit more of a fight, particularly offensively. Um, and yeah, just thinking about it, I did feel like the Orioles did have a chance to win this series because we were playing Kansas City. So definitely, I think a lot of Oriole fans were excited that we weren't playing the Tigers. I think to some extent that excitement that we were able to miss them was justified, given that how we've seen that they went into Houston and beat the Astros. But it definitely was not the Orioles. I did not feel were in a comforting place. I don't think that 1 week of improved baseball. Uh, overrides the last 3 months that we've seen from this team. So I definitely felt like uh, if the Orioles were going to win the World Series, the Orioles would have had to have been the first half Orioles for this playoffs. And for anyone who's been watching the team, that team, the first half Orioles, has been dead for a long time, unfortunately. And it was sort of demonstrated here, demonstrated in this series. And yeah, the Orioles have a very early exit. Yeah, from the playoffs in what was at the beginning of the year hopeful to be yeah, a potential World Series run or at least a deep playoff run, and neither of those things happened. So yeah, so just thinking a little bit about it. Yeah, there were some key highlights in the game. Uh yeah, that we can sort of go over a little bit. Now I do think that the Orioles were not hmm, so the Orioles offense, of course, did not play well today. We scored 1 run on a solo home run by Cedric Mullins. That was it as far as the offense goes. I think that the Orioles did have some possibility, perhaps, of doing a little bit more offensively and ran into some bad luck. So in the third inning, for instance, Ramon Urias was leading off, hit a rocket out to left field that would have been a home run in 27 out of the 30 major league ballparks. And not only was it not a home run, it was robbed by MJ Melendez out in left field. So that was a so the Orioles were already down 1-0 at that point. And when that happened, that was really sort of a big blow, I think, for the Orioles offense. Um, Definitely no guarantees with this offense that he would have scored. But having that hit taken away was definitely difficult to bear, even though it was early in the game. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, something like that happens, and you're like, okay, we still got, plenty of innings to go here. But in that situation, it did feel like a bit of a bit of a gut punch. In the fourth inning, of course, this is something that's gotten a lot of attention. Massey, the second baseman for the Royals, made a diving play. The Orioles had runners on first and second with 1 out, and Massey made a diving play. Now, granted, the ball was not hit that hard, um, but he did make a really good play. It did seem like it could have went, found some space in the outfield, and it didn't. And Massey dove and then was able to throw to first to retire O'Hearn. Yeah, and I mean, leading up to that, granted, I think it's fair to acknowledge that I think that both of these sorts of plays were unlucky, but I do think the Orioles did get a little fortune the prior at bat where Adley did not hit a ball very hard, but was able to get a single out of it. So perhaps the two ground balls there sort of compensate for each other. But yeah, and basically Run didn't end up scoring, so we had second and third with 2 outs, and then of course we didn't get the run in. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Santander here in a minute because that has, of course, gotten a lot of the attention, and his performance has gotten a lot of attention. But he did in the fourth inning get a single to sort of set the stage for all of that. So he got a nice single to lead off the inning, which then led to this sequence of events where the Orioles didn't end up scoring. But yeah, so I mean, there was just, I mean, the offense had plenty of opportunities to do at least more than what we did. Situational hitting has been a problem for the Orioles. I think, as most Oriole fans know. But we had yeah. I mean, everybody know. Okay, I guess I can just talk about Santander here for a minute in general. So Santander, I mean, he overall, I think it's fair to say that he had a rough, just like almost the rest of the Orioles except Cedric Mullins had a rough 2 days. Um, so funny enough, in this at bat, in the fourth inning, he Santander, where he did get a hit ultimately, but before that single, he was in a 1-0 count, and right, a hitter's count. You're looking for something. You're looking for your pitch, basically, and he swung at a curveball in the dirt on a 1-0 pitch that I don't even think made it to home plate. So it was just like an absolute, it really should have been a non-competitive pitch. The count should have gone to 2-0, and instead Santander took a wild hack at it, and it turned out to be 1-1. So again, he did end up making a single out of that at bat, but I bring this up because it did feel like it was sort of symbolic a bit of Santander's approach throughout the series. I don't know if he was trying to guess too much, or I don't know exactly what was going through his head, but his approach looked really, really off throughout most of the series. Now, in the big spot, funny enough, and I guess somewhat ironically, in that critical inning in the fifth inning, um, he popped up. He popped up a 91.9, so I guess 92 mile an hour fastball on a 1-1 count. And we had the bases loaded. There were no outs. It was after Cedric Mullins hit the home run. We loaded the bases. Things were looking good, even though I think a lot of Oriole fans had a feeling deep down that, we were going to squander this opportunity. I think I was feeling it. I am sure that given the history of yesterday's game and the game today, that there was a lot of feeling that we're going to blow this opportunity. Ultimately, we ended up doing exactly that. But Santander got into a 1-1 count. And at that point, you're looking for something to drive. Santander is probably thinking, okay, either let me get something really good to hit and I bust this game open, I hit something off the wall, and we're leading 4-1, and we feel really, really good about our chances. Or at a bare minimum, let me try to loft something into the air, get something to right field. We're going to score a run. We're going to get the runner to third. Everything would be great. And actually, in that at bat, when he swung at this 1-1 pitch, it actually seemed like a great pitch to swing at. Uh, he's probably looking for something up in the zone that he can hit up in the air, and he missed it, and he ends up popping out, I think, to first base. And I mean, it was really, really frustrating. He was clearly frustrated after that, as anybody would be in that situation. But people being mad about that, I mean, it's really, really unfortunate. It's frustrating, but at least he had the right approach. I think he had the right mindset in that moment. He was trying to do the right thing. The pitch selection, as far as what he swung at, was a good pitch to swing at. We've seen him drive pitches like that off the wall and for home runs over and over and over again. So, in terms of him swinging, it was a great pitch to swing at, and he just missed it by a fraction of an inch. And that's the difference in baseball between popping up and hitting a grand slam sometimes. Um, so I'm not really upset about that, but overall, his approach in the series, we know Santander is overall a very, very good hitter. He only had one hit in the series. He ended up having one strikeout only. But yeah, I mean that so his approach overall, I think, was really frustrating at many moments. I don't know what was going through his head, and I feel like Santander is generally a very prepared hitter and has a very good mindset and approach at the plate, but just for some reason this series that didn't come through. Um, so and it's frustrating in particular because especially with given the off-season questions about whether he's going to return, that's really going to be the big moment that a lot of people remember um perhaps about his time here. So we'll see, but it's just not an ideal way to go out, and I know he's going to be really, really thinking about that for a long time because if you get a big hit there, perhaps the whole series is different. So, you don't know. So yeah, I mean, the offense, of course, with the exception of Cedric Mullins, who did hit the solo home run, was really, really uh yeah, really, really difficult to watch. In general, I mean, I think it was sort of perfectly manifested right after the Santander pop up when it it looks a lot worse than it actually is. I mean, it was bad when this happens, but when the bases were loaded, there was one out from the Santander pop up, and basically Colton Cowser comes up. He's behind in the count, and he ends up swinging at a pitch that hits him square, like square in the wrist. And he ends up striking out because he swung at the pitch, despite it hitting him. The Royals were begging to give the Orioles a run right there, begging to let us take the lead and go up 2-1. And instead, no, we swung at the pitch and, really, really, it looked really bad. It was, I mean, yeah, it was a bad play overall. I mean, it looked bad from a is Colton Cowser okay perspective, and it also just looked really bad from like that was really horrendous baseball right there. So from both of those angles, it was bad. And then after that strikeout, then Adley grounds out, and that was the inning. So on yeah, on the and then I mean one other like very small moment that sort of also demonstrates a little bit what this offense looked like in the eighth inning. Austin Slater did get a hit with two outs, and then Ryan Mountcastle swings at the first pitch, hits a grounder to short, and gets out. So the offense just like did not have it. On the pitching half, the pitching was very, very good once again. Zach Eflin went 4 innings. This is another thing about sort of, when thinking about the Orioles going deep in the playoffs. Um, Out of a number two starter, you're going to need someone that goes deeper into a game uh, in order to make a deep World Series run. Now, I know bullpens, especially in today's game, um, in the playoffs when it gets to the playoffs a lot of the outcomes of the games are determined by the bullpens, and a lot of times starters have shorter leashes and stuff like that. But Zach Eflin went 4 innings. Okay, maybe you say, the Orioles are in a must-win game and there's a really, really short leash here for Eflin. But overall, if we went deeper into the playoffs, we can't have our number two starter go 4 innings. That's just not sustainable for making a deep playoff run. So yeah, Zach Eflin went 4 innings. He didn't. Uh, he looked fine. I wasn't expecting, I definitely was not expecting something like a Corbin Burns start or 6 innings, 1 run. I wasn't expecting that. So he did fine. He did good. He looked good. He gave up a run in the first inning, and then that was about it. Cianel Perez, who took a really tough loss in the game. Uh, yeah, really, really tough loss in the game. He pitched actually really well. He ended up conceding an infield hit that chopped off the plate, went a mile high. Urias at third, who caught the ball, had no chance at first. Um, and then there was just like a little bloop single. I think if we're looking at managerial decisions and thinking about what Brandon Hyde, uh, you know, was doing, this is sort of the moment to look at in the game. For some reason, the Orioles once again, even after being hurt yesterday by Bobby Witt, we decide some for some reason to pitch to Bobby Witt once again, and it ends up burning us. He ends up driving the run from third, turns out to be the winning run of the game. The Royals at that point take a 2-1 lead. I think all Oriole fans at that point are feeling like this game is over. I had really very little optimism at that point. I definitely watched the rest of the game, but I didn't have any confidence that we were going to find a way to win. Uh, yeah, and uh, I mean the other thing about this is, we're bringing in Cano, who is notoriously a ground ball pitcher, and Bobby Witt is the fastest player in baseball. So not necessarily a great combination when you consider both of those things, and that's exactly what happened. Bobby Witt Jr. Hit a ball back up the middle. Jordan Westberg yeah, tried to make a play, wasn't able to, and a run scored because of it. That's just that's just what happens. But other than that, the pitching was definitely good enough. I mean, it was definitely good enough to win these past two games. It was good enough basically for almost yeah, the pitching was fine, and you have no complaints. Obviously we know about what Burns did. uh the bullpen was fine. Everybody, no complaints on the pitching end. Really, you just have to look at the offense, and you have to look at this offense realistically, and you have to say, like, this was not an offense that was prepared to make a deep run in the playoffs. It just wasn't. And the Orioles, it would have been really, really nice to have gotten a playoff win, uh, even just to, like, I mean, the Mullins home run felt big because we were like proverbially like breaking this ice that we hadn't broken by scoring a run, right? Like the Royals had thrown whatever it was, 13, 14 innings at that point without us scoring a run. So when Mullins hits a home run, proverbially we are breaking the ice there. Um, and in the same way, I think that it was important that the Orioles break the ice now and get a playoff win. Even if that was all that came out of this, I think that would have been. Uh, I think if the Orioles had gotten one win, obviously we're not going to be satisfied with that, but we can at least feel like, okay, at least this is not going to be a storyline going into the playoffs next year that the Orioles haven't had a win. This is going to be something that's in psychologically in the back of the players' minds, etc. And it is going to be that. So of course, a lot of people have been, I guess to some extent rightfully so, making a big deal out of the 10 consecutive playoff losses. Realistically, I'm not as worried about that. I mean, we got swept by the Royals. We had the bad, notorious Zach Britton game, but I am concerned in general about losing two in this series, and then being swept last year in the series against the Rangers. I do think both of those situations are. I mean, we're 0-5 in the playoffs, and that is not good, especially for a team that is this talented. And how are the Orioles going to get around that, right? I mean, that is going to be the question. So yeah, like I said, I'm just sort of, and I narrow it because none of the guys who are around when we had the previous playoff losses are really around now, right? So That's why I'm not really worried about that. But I am thinking about this 0 and 5 thing, and that is sort of the focus in my mind, at least. And yeah, the Orioles do have to find a way to get a playoff win so that they can even just grow a little bit in confidence about being in these situations, right? And right now, the Orioles don't really have that. It's the second consecutive year that we've gone out like this, and it's just really really unfortunate, and it's not equivalent, or it's not reflective of the talent that this team has. Now, you think, I mean, I'm not going to get into the is Brandon Hyde fireable. I'm not going to get into that in this conversation. Um, Perhaps, what his future is with the Orioles. Perhaps we will make an episode about that in the next couple days, weeks, whatever. Um, but it is really the Orioles do have to find a way to, because it's more than, I mean, the first step is breaking the ice, but then even going beyond that, it's actually, learning to try to win series and have some foundational knowledge for how to win in the playoffs, right? Which the Orioles don't have. You look at a team like, despite their losses, that's what the Astros have. They know how to win in the playoffs. They have all this expertise and wisdom that they can draw on. Now, I think if you're thinking about, at least for me, comparing this playoff exit to last year's playoff exit, I think it doesn't sting nearly as badly. The Orioles were a 101 win team last year, going into the playoffs having never been swept during the entire season. And uh, I mean, we were just feeling on top of the world at that point entering the playoffs, right? And this season, the Orioles had a lot of struggles. And I think that, with those struggles in mind, I think that sort of shapes and molds how this team was feeling entering the playoffs. So, there are definitely, I think, a lot of questions that need to be answered from this organization, from the players, et cetera, moving forward. I don't know how those things are going to get addressed, but the Orioles need to try. I mean, we talk about the Orioles having a big window, but every year that goes by, I mean, we say it all the time, nothing is taken for granted. You look at very, very good baseball teams, the 2010s Tigers, or I don't know, maybe 2005 to 2015 Tigers. I can't remember exactly, but somewhere in there, that team never won a World Series, right? There have been plenty of teams that have had great, great teams on paper. Think about the Dodgers right now. They did win in 2020 in the condensed season. But if you're a Dodgers fan, you're probably wishing you had a little bit more, given all the 100 plus win seasons they've had in the past few years. So, um, you can't take anything for granted. A World Series for the Orioles is not guaranteed in the next 5, 10 years. It's not at all guaranteed. So the Orioles need to find a way to quickly begin building and to begin uh, making progress, right, on this quest for a World Series title, which I think, we'll talk about this in a season review episode, but the Orioles took you have to look at it, and the Orioles took a big step back this year. Now, the Orioles had an opportunity, even though they took a step back in the win-loss column, they had an opportunity to take a step forward with their playoff performance, and the Orioles didn't do that this year. So, just thinking about it, it's going to be really, really disappointing, and we're going to have to wait several long, difficult months in order to be hopeful about this team's chances again moving forward. So, yeah, really tough exit. And it's tough how it happened too. I mean, just the offense being completely broken basically this playoffs. Was just difficult to watch. I think it just it shaped everything. It shaped the mentality, it shaped the confidence levels. But I mean, that's all there is to say. The offense was broken, and there was no way that this Orioles team was going to get around that with this kind of offense. You can't ask the pitching staff to throw shutouts, even though they came very close to doing that in both games. So yeah, difficult. And also, we'll talk about this a bit more, I would imagine, in the future, but it's also just difficult, given we don't know the fate of two really, really key and important players for this team. Corbin Burns, free agent this offseason. We don't know where he'll be. And longtime Oriole Anthony Santander, also really unfortunate. He might be gone after this offseason. So we will find out. Yeah, we will, I think it's fair to say Oriole fans will miss both of them. So, yeah, overall, just another really, really disappointing first round exit for the Orioles in the MLB playoffs. We've now lost 10 straight playoff games, uh, five straight playoff games in the Brandon Hyde era. And yeah, not a lot more to say. Yeah, for any Oriole fans struggling, I hope that you are making it through. I was gonna say, I actually was thinking about this, but I was gonna say Shana Tova to all the Jewish listeners out there, which roughly is translated to good year for Rosh Hashanah. But yeah, it's tough because as far as the Orioles go, we are not off to a good year. So in any case, all right. I think that'll wrap it for for this episode. It's really kind of a miserable episode because the Orioles are suffering another really disappointing and frustrating playoff exit. Uh, I guess the only thing we can do now is hope for better things to come in the future. You can feel free to follow the show, give us a 5-star rating and review. You can feel free to find our YouTube channel. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. If you have any thoughts about anything we've said, you can feel free to comment your thoughts. If you want to get in touch with the show, at you can email us at thewarehousepod@gmail.com. Whenever I say that, I wanted to make it because I then announced the Instagram, the Twitter, and I don't want people to think it's like the at symbol. But anyway, I think you all know that. But yeah, it's just weird in my mind to include the at sort of unnecessarily in that situation. But in any case, and as I was going to say, you can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at the Warehouse Pod. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening. This has been the Warehouse Podcast. My name is Jesse, and go O's.